I have some brand new Star Trek fan fiction for you. 10 out of 10. Excellent stuff. Check this out. Captain's Log 5442.5. Spock, Sulu, Dr. McCoy, and Scott are 880 fathoms deep in the Sea of Bathos on the planet Olympia, in a deep-sea submersible submarine. The crew is in search of the remains of an Enterprise shuttlecraft lost 18 hours prior that crashed on the water's surface in response to an ion storm. "I hear a ping," Sulu said, holding a headphone speaker to his ear. "Faint, but regular. We found the shuttlecraft. I will enter the coordinates." Has anyone figured out how we're going to transfer the crew from the shuttlecraft to this infernal machine? That is, if anyone is still alive, McCoy asked. I am not getting in that dirty water. Who knows what slimy, dangerous, filthy creatures live here? Spock replied, "The submersible is equipped with underwater rescue gear. Don't worry, Doctor. No one expects you to get wet." Just then, the submersible snapped and a crack appeared on the clear forward water shield. "Holy crap," McCoy yelled. "Get us to the surface." "No, Doctor," Spock replied. "We are well within the limits of this submersible. We are not in immediate danger." "How much further down is the shuttlecraft?" McCoy asked. Sulu read his computer readout and replied, "About 500 feet. No, get me out of here," McCoy barked. "It would take longer to surface than to get to the shuttlecraft, and there are lives at stake," Spock replied. "We must go on." "We won't do anyone any good if we are dead," McCoy barked. Then a red light blinked on the dash. With a repeating warning bell, McCoy pointed at the light and said, "Now what?" Sulu replied, "Pressure on the hull has increased to an unsustainable level." "Spock, you must surface now," McCoy yelled. Spock was reluctant to agree, but stated, "Yes, Doctor, we need to climb. Helmsman, take us to the surface." "Aye," Sulu replied, and pulled back on the controls. Scott asked, "What about the crew on the shuttlecraft? They won't make it much longer." "Get out and swim," McCoy snapped back. "You could be a bit more compassionate, Dr. McCoy," Scott replied. "You're a doctor, for gosh sake." "Yes, I'm a doctor, not a fish," McCoy barked. "What point is there if we all die? If you were a decent engineer, you would have found a way to transport them out of the shuttlecraft onto the shore." "Oh, don't go there, Doctor," Scott said. "Transporting through the water is nothing like transporting through space." "Tell that to the crew on the shuttlecraft," McCoy said. "That's not fair," Scott replied. "This isn't my fault. The transporter on this machine isn't strong enough." "Of course it's your fault," McCoy said. "I'm a mile down under an ocean in a defective death tube because you can't do basic engineering." Scott reached over and grabbed McCoy by his face and slammed his ear into the side of the submersible. "I'll show you engineering, you son of a bitch," Scott yelled. McCoy reached for his hypodermic syringe and tried to jab the needle end into Scott's arm, but was unable to get the angle right. Instead, he punched Scott in the back of the head and tried to strangle him from behind. "Stop!" Spock yelled as he tried to get a Vulcan neck pinch on McCoy. "Get your slimy Vulcan fingers off me," McCoy yelled as he scooted back away from the rest of the crew. Then another crack, this time from the rear, and the submersible tipped down and began to free fall. "I can't control it," Sulu yelled, pulling back on his controls. "We have no thrusters." "How long until we reach crush death?" Spock asked. "Minutes," Sulu replied. McCoy, at his wits' end, yelled, "Spock, do something before we all die." "We may be able to equalize our buoyancy if we can discharge some weight," Spock said. "Don't just talk about it. Do something," McCoy yelled. Spock replied, "Mr. Scott, this vessel does have some basic transport capabilities, right?" "Yes, but not much. Maybe enough to transport a man a few hundred yards at best," Scott replied. "Based on weight and mass, I calculate if we transport Dr. McCoy out of the submersible, we should be able to surface," Spock replied. "Out of the submersible?" McCoy asked. The shore is miles away. Exactly, Doctor. We will have to transport you into the sea, Spock replied. I can probably do that, Scott said. Give me a minute to configure the transporter. You are not transporting me anywhere, McCoy yelled. Not without an air tank. At this depth, an air tank would do you no good, Spock replied. Your body would be crushed, and you would dissolve into the surrounding sea. Who are you to decide who lives and who dies, McCoy asked. You and I are about the same size. You go. I am 8 kilograms lighter than you. I don't have enough mass, Spock replied. I will speak at your funeral and tell everyone of your unselfish self-sacrifice. There you go. Right there, hopefully, will be a link to all of my fan fiction stories. Then you can watch them all. I have like 30 of them now. Subscribe. I need lots more subscribers. This is fun to do. I wrote them all myself. I do appreciate you being here. Thanks again.